Today we're going to have a look at trigonometry. So this is a revision lesson. To begin with, we're going to look at the basics. So these are the things that you need to know in order to attempt this question of trigonometry. So to begin with, the first basic you need is to be able to label up your triangle. You have three different sides: the hypotenuse, the opposite, and the adjacent. So we're going to start off with the hypotenuse. This one is always the longest side in your triangle, and it's always opposite the right angle. So this one is our hypotenuse. Our next one is the length, which is opposite the given angle. So this angle here, this x, they're either given to you as a number or it's asked you to work it out. So it would be called letter x or y, for example. So this side opposite that is called our opposite. Our final length is our adjacent length. This one is always between the two angles, so between your 90 degree, your right angle, and your given angle. Once we have worked out and labelled up our triangle correctly, we then need to remember our one magic word. So our magic word is so, ka, toa. So so, ka, toa. If you write it in the way I've done, where you raise each of the middle letters, so now we're at the stage where we can put these letters into our triangle. So to begin with, our first triangle is our so triangle. And remember that S just stands for sine. Our second triangle is our ka part. So C, A raised, and then H. And remember that the C stands for that cos. And our final triangle is our toa triangle. So again, we fill in the letters. Our middle letter is the one which is raised. And remember that T stands for tan on your calculator. So you would have seen these triangles before with your speed, distance, time. They are used in the exact same way. So if it helps, you can fill in your operations. So this line here means divide, and then this line here means multiply. And that's the same for all three triangles. Once we've got those basics sorted, we can now work out each formula from our triangle. For example, if I wanted to work out what sine of my angle x is, then my formula would be, so I cover up my sine, that leaves me with opposite divided by hypotenuse. If I was asked to work out what my hypotenuse length is, I cover up my h, that gives me my formula opposite divided by sine of my angle. And finally, if I wanted to work out what my opposite length was, I cover that one up in the triangle, and that would tell me it's sine of my angle times by my hypotenuse length. You can do that for your other two triangles now. The other formulas, cos x is equal to a divided by h, h is equal to a divided by cos x, and a is equal to cos x times by h. And finally, tan of x is equal to my opposite over adjacent. My adjacent is equal to opposite over tan of my angle. And finally, my opposite is equal to tan of my angle times by adjacent. So those formulas, those 9 formulas you have got from your triangles, is what you'd have to learn if you didn't use the triangles. However, it's much easier just to remember this one magic word, SOHCAHTOA, and be able to get your triangles from that word. So I'm going to talk you through this exam question. So to begin with, our first step, we've got to be able to label up the sides of our triangle. So the first one we're going to label is our hypotenuse length, which is always the side opposite the right angle, and it's always the longest side. Then we're going to label up our opposite. This is always opposite the given angle. So opposite side there. And then finally our adjacent is the last one, and it's always between the 2 angles. Next, in every trigonometry question there is one side which you won't use. So let's read the question. It wants us to calculate the length of AB. So I'm going to go ahead and label that side with the letter X. That's the side which it wants us to work out. So this length here, AB. Therefore, we have been given information about our hypotenuse. It tells us that's 16 centimetres. It's asked us to work out our opposite. However, there is no information about our adjacent. So we can go ahead and cross that side out. We don't need it for this question. So now, step 2. We're going to write down our magic word. SOHCAHTOA. Now we know we've got the sides O, opposite, which we've been asked to work out, and hypotenuse, which is 16. So we're looking for the triangle which includes opposite and hypotenuse. That is this triangle here. So now I'm going to draw out my triangle. We have been asked to work out our opposite side. So now using my triangle, I'm going to cover up the O with my finger, and that tells me that the formula is sine of my angle, which is 38 in this case, times by my hypotenuse length. So times by 16. When you type this in a calculator, please make sure that you do type in the extra bracket after that 38. So just like I've written it down. So sine brackets 38 brackets times 16. You'll then get the answer 9.85053, and that keeps going on. We then check back to our question. It tells us to round this to 2 decimal places. So therefore our final answer is 9.85 centimetres. Okay, so now's the chance for you to pause the video and see if you can have a go at this question. Okay, so having a look at this question here. It's very similar to the last, however we're working out the length BC this time. So my first step, just like before, is to label on our sides. Hypotenuse, opposite, adjacent. Cross out the one which we're not interested in, because we've been asked to work out what BC is. Write down your magic word. Select the correct triangle. This time we're using A and H, so it's going to be our middle triangle with the K formula. Then sub in the values you know and work out the answer. So this time it's asked us to work out our adjacent side. So we're going to cover up the letter A in our triangle. That tells us the formula must be cos of the angle 38 times by the hypotenuse length. So cos 38 times by 16. Remember to close your bracket around the 38 as you write it in your calculator. So therefore your answer is 12.60817. Then it asks you to round that to 2 decimal places. So here, if we round that to 2 decimal places, we would get 12.61 centimetres. Our next question, it's asked you to find a missing angle this time. We still do the same first steps. So we label up our triangle. Our 14 is the one opposite your right angle, which is your hypotenuse. The one opposite the angle which it's been asked to work out is your opposite. And then your last one is your adjacent. Again, just like before, we cross out the one which we haven't been given or told to work out, which is our adjacent. Our next step, write down the magic word, SOHCAHTOA. Have a look at which sides they've given you. We've got our opposite and our hypotenuse this time. So we're going to select the triangle which has both O and H in. Once we've selected our triangle, we draw it out, and this time it's asked you to find the missing angle. Whenever it's asking you to find a missing angle, you're always going to be looking to work out the first letter in each triangle. So we know our formula must be sine of the angle is equal to our opposite divided by our hypotenuse. So our opposite is 5 divided by our hypotenuse of 14. Again, we've got that formula from just looking at that triangle there. And we covered up our S, and it told us it was opposite divided hypotenuse. Now you'll notice that that answer is going to be a very small number. And we actually just want to work out what the angle X is. At the moment we've got sine of X. So we need to do one final step. We need to get rid of that sine on the left hand side. So we do the opposite of it. That's called doing the inverse sine. So in your calculators it will look like sine to the -1. So this is where you press shift, then sine on your calculator, and then you type in 5 divided by 14. That then gives you your answer of 20.92, and that keeps going on. So then it's asked us to round it to 1 decimal place. So this is going to be 20.9 degrees to 1 decimal place. Now's your chance to pause the video and have a go at this question. Okay, so our first steps remain the same. Opposite the right angle is our hypotenuse. Opposite the angle they've asked to work out is your opposite. And then your one, which is between the two angles, is your adjacent side. Write down your magic word. Select the correct formula. So here we've got A and H given to us. There is no information about our opposite. So this time we are selecting our K triangle. So it wants you to work out the missing angle. So again we're going to cover up our first letter, which is cos of our angle X. That then tells us, using our triangle, that it's our adjacent length, 6.4, divided by our hypotenuse length, 9.6. Again, that gives us a very small decimal answer, and not the answer we're looking for. Just like before, we need to get rid of that cos by doing the inverse cos. So then we type this into our calculator, cos to the -1 of 6.4 divided by 9.6, and we'll get the answer 48.189. Again, have a look at the question. Wants you to round it to 1 decimal place, so our final answer is 48.2 degrees. So now we've had a look at some basic problems using trigonometry. We're now going to focus our attention on having a look at questions which are given in context. So here we've got this ladder leaning against the wall, and it gives you the information labelled on. And it wants to know whether this ladder is safe to use. In order to show that it is or isn't safe, we need to work out that missing angle y. So we're going to start like before. Hypotenuse is the longest side, opposite the right angle, opposite the given angle is our opposite, and then that leaves us with our adjacent, which touches both angles. Here we need to perform a check, just make sure the units are the same. They are both in metres, so that's fine. Now we're going to cross out which one is irrelevant, where we're given no information about our opposite length. We're going to write out our magic word, so, ka, toa. We're going to select the correct triangle. We've been given our adjacent and hypotenuse, for we know it is our ka triangle. So now we need to work out the missing angle. That is always the first letter. So it'll be cos of y is equal to our adjacent side, 2.25, divided by our hypotenuse side. Again, to work out what y is, we do cos to the minus 1 of 2.25 divided by 6, which gives us our final answer of 67.975 degrees. It tells us in our question that this ladder is safe to use when angle marked y is about 75 degrees. No, it's not safe to use as it's too far away from 75 degrees, but you had to write that last line to get your communication mark. So our final question. Pause the video now if you'd like to have a go at this before I go through it. Okay, so here they've given us quite a complicated diagram. The key points here are labelled on already. We've got AD as 4.4, we've got BC as 8.6, and the only other key bit of information is that E is the midpoint of DB. So I know that these two lines are exactly equal. It wants us to work out the size of angle EAD. So in order to work out the size of angle EAD, we need to work out this angle here. We've got one side of our triangle, however, we're going to need another length in our triangle. So we're going to have to use our big triangle BDC to work out the missing length of BD. So this is our first step, find BD. That'll allow us to work out what ED is, because we know it's halfway, because it's the midpoint. And then once we've got ED, we'll be able to work out that missing angle. So ED, and then step 3, angle X. So to begin with, step 1, we're going to look at the larger triangle BDC. Again, we're going to label this up. So we have got our hypotenuse, we've got our opposite, and we've got our adjacent. Now here we want the opposite sides. We're going to cross out our adjacent. We're going to write down our magic word, so, ka, toa. We've got O and we've got H, so therefore we're using our so triangle. Now we're going to fill in the information we've been told. Well, it's asked us to work out our opposite. I'm going to call my opposite side y, and that formula tells me it must be sine of 40 times by my hypotenuse length of 8.6. So sine 40 times by 8.6, which is 5.527. So here we need to make sure that we don't round this just yet, otherwise we could get an error in our rounding. So we're going to keep this saved as our answer button. Step 2 is to work out our length ED. Well, it's the midpoint between BD. So if we just work out what half of BD is. So this is where we use our answer button and we divide it by 2 to give us 2.763. And finally, we're going to use that now to work out our missing angle. So I can label on ED is this 2.63. So now we can label up our triangle. 2.73 is our opposite length. Our hypotenuse is opposite this right angle here. And then our adjacent side is the one touching both of them. So here, we don't have any information about our hypotenuse. And we've only got information about our opposite and adjacent. So again, we're going to draw out our triangle, which has the lengths opposite and adjacent in, which is our TOA triangle. We're trying to work out the angle, so we cover up our tan of x, and that tells us the formula is our opposite, 2.763, divided by our adjacent, 4.4. And again, our final step is to inverse tan. So we're just left with what x is. So now we can type this in our calculator. So it'll be inverse tan, so shift tan of our answer, and if you keep it as your answer, you'll be able to use your answer button here, divided by 4.4. And we get the answer 32.136. Then just double check the question. It tells you to write this to 1 decimal place. So therefore, x is equal to 32.1 degrees.